here is one throw from Trey Lance's day that we were allowed to film. We're going to talk about coming up some of the throws we saw that we were not allowed to film. But let's talk about one throw that Trey Lance made that stood out to us. And the video is, for those of you watching, let's watch the video together. Here it is, Trey Lance to the left of your screen. And we'll run it a couple times, but let's watch this throw here. Play action. And he's got kind of the sidearm fling. My first reaction when I saw this was kind of Kyler-esque or Rodgers-esque with the footwork and the sidearm. This is obviously he's simulating kind of a game situation where he's avoiding a pass rusher, maybe somebody at his side, somebody reaching up in front of him. He's got to throw it around them to the flat.
Go play by play for the podcast audience. If this was an actual play and that guy was an untouched rusher.
Oh,
it's hard. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, here Trey Lance play action under pressure. Bosa sidestep. Yeah, it's too hard. But what do you think?
I mean, I would say I didn't notice this. It's good film work by you.
You have to be like, look out, get rid of it, Trey.
This is I would say this is an encouraging sign. Because one thing I would say Jimmy really struggled with doing is ad-libbing. And a couple times he ad-libbed this year where those kind of rollouts, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be sweet. And then he threw it right to the other team. Now, there's no defenders. There's an equipment guy that's catching the ball. And I told you, he's actually pretty good. I didn't see a ball hit the ground. He caught everything. He's got good hands for an equipment guy. I would just say it's encouraging just being able to move the arm angle around, right? And still put velocity because he's got a really big arm. Like, this is what, when someone in the chat was saying about his size, to me, his size, last year when I saw him, right away you go, that looks like a big-time NFL prospect. Now he's an NFL player, and I was thinking about this on the drive home, like, now it's about, like, putting all the physical gifts together, and so is Fields is going to be trying to do that. Zach Wilson trying to do it, and then become a good player. And we're just watching Mahomes and Josh Allen. They do the basic things pretty well, but what really has put them, why they can sit next to Brady and Rodgers, is they do spectacular things. And part of the reason we pounded the table for Fields or Lance, I'm not giving up on Fields yet, even though I think it's probably going to be a tough season for him, over Mac Jones, was I can live with some of the shitty. Mahomes has some shitty. Jimmy had a ton of shitty. I'm paying for the spectacular here when I'm drafting really high. And obviously this is a simulated drill where the dude gets to just come off. But that is a play that happens sometimes, right? In Kyle's offense, play action, you try to get the backside guy to bite. Well, if you're playing and now half of his minions are all over the league, I would imagine during the week, it's like, stay home, stay home, stay home, stay home. He's going to be put in that predicament. I would bet $50,000 this season, potentially in September, right? They run the ball a lot. They do play action, and they're going to use his athleticism. So, like, can he ad-lib? Mahomes, Josh Allen, Rodgers, ad-lib the shit out of it. That's really not a Brady play because you wouldn't put Brady in that predicament, right? He's not athletic enough. But those guys, the guys that can move and they can make things happen if it's not there. And to me, that, and again, I'm not saying he's like, I don't know if it's going to translate to the game. Time will tell, but that's what you're envisioning when you take a huge swing. It's just like, I have no clue how we just got a 27-yard gain. Well, it's because he stopped on a dime. He threw it from his shoulder, and he got it 15 yards over a defender, right?
So I think what's interesting when we talk about the differences between practice and games sometimes is I think that
it always comes back to Mac Jones
in the chat. I think that like there are a lot of things that professional athletes, the elite of the elite, can do in non-game situations. And then what happens is you move up from high school to college to the NFL. And even for some of the best, somewhere along the way, you realize, well, I can't do that and get away with it at this level. And then there's a few guys like Mahomes and Rodgers and Josh Allen whose physical skills are so great that the things that other people have to cut out of their diet, so to speak, or have to take off the table, they can keep doing because they just the league never says to them, oh, you shouldn't make that play. It's not worth the risk. And I think Garoppolo oftentimes one of the things you loved about Jimmy, kind of the Romo-esque part of him was he had this like what every guy who plays quarterback grew up like in the 90s or early 2000s. You just Favre, man. Like everyone wanted to make Favre throws.
You know when you sprint like 5 yards to the left and you just let it rip,
And
but when you do it in your backyard, it skips. You're like, God.
But guess what? Brett got old, and in the end, Brett threw a middle of the field interception in the playoffs to end his career, right?
Yeah,
like
sad.
Eventually it gets everybody. But the question is
NFC championship game.
But the question is, when you are at your peak, who can pull it off and who can't? And I think one of the things that makes Garoppolo a roller coaster is he's I think pretty creative mentally. He's got some creative mind. And there are some things he tries to do that if he was more physically capable, and I mean like elite, like Mahomes, or he would get away with some stuff, but he's not, and he doesn't get away with it.
Because wouldn't you say like Tony Romo is the best version of Jimmy? You know, he's a little better athlete, a little bigger, but in that same vein where you're like, if Tony probably in a weird way would have played more like Phillip Rivers, Brady, and Manning, like more under control, every once in a while did it, but it felt like both those guys like, I got this. It's like, well, I don't think if you should be
time to make a play.
Yeah. Well, what would Tom Brady do right here? He'd hit the ground or he'd throw it at the guy's feet immediately, right? Because he just wouldn't fuck around,
right?
Because he's been ingrained in his mind like there is no fuck around in this spot. We always live to fight another day. Mahomes at minimum would do a 360 and try to run away,
which can be dangerous.
Yeah, and it gets him in trouble. Josh Allen might just grab the defender, throw him to the ground, and keep running around and then throw a touchdown.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, this is what the Mahomes effect is. This is really what you're looking for. 20, 30 years ago, like when we were kids, that was like doing the, like, no, they didn't want any of that, right? They just wanted pocket quarterbacks. You know, they wanted NFL starting versions of like Nate Sudfeld, 6'4", tall, big arm. That's not, this is where I go back to giving Kyle and just the group credit for at least taking the swing is like, I got to take a swing on this now because the rules, you know, it's not really just a pure, Trey Lance, if he's going to be a great player, is going to have to win within the pocket. Josh does it. Mahomes does it. All the good, Lamar's gotten better at it. Herbert's thrived at it. So that's not going to change. But what's going to make him a really good player to me is going to be the ad lib ability. And I do think that was a huge reason in the draft room that ultimately Kyle, whether he started with Mac or even if they went in even, ended up with this guy. The upside is just not there with McCorkle. Because that ultimately, I think, was, as we've talked about, it was Mac Jones and Trey Lance.
Yeah, I'm
not saying Mac might be able to do some semblance of this. I'm not acting like he's just.
Well,
I don't think Mac's some scrub.
Look, John, I mean, part of why we talk about Trey Lance now, the time is now to play him, is part of this is he has to prove to Kyle Shanahan that Kyle shouldn't try to reel him in when he goes off script, right? That's part of what he's got to earn. And the reality is when you're your first year as a rookie, most of what you do is not that stuff that we're looking at here. Most of what you do is whatever Kyle's going to scheme open JaMychal Hasty on some wheel route, and I just got to hit him in stride.
Do you remember? Let's just assume they're a good team.
JaMychal Hasty may not make the team,
but Trey is just solid. Remember early on in Russell's career, it was like Russell just benefited from great defense, Marshawn Lynch, and then it was proved like the more he got to cook, all he wanted to do was cook. And then it's going to be fascinating. I would say one of the main differences is like ultimately Pete, like his success at USC running the ball. Kyle, like Jimmy has been allowed to do a lot of stuff. Now Jimmy has earned that trust early, in 17 and in 19 when they were having some success early on. I'm going to be fascinated by just the leash that he gives, the way he calls games. Because last year, and I remember defending him, even though it was concerning that Arizona game. Kyle just went in there with like a very, very basic game plan. I think he would tell you over beers. Like I was not going to put the kid in an uncompromising situation like that. It's not about my ego. It's about the safety of him and just giving him, if he knows 7 plays really well, just try to run these 7 plays. We got the talent around him to attempt to win the game. Looking back, I don't think it's that crazy because remember, people were pissed. You're just running the same play over and over. And it was like, yeah, well, I mean, the guy's 21 years old coming from North Dakota State. Maybe Trey will say one day, like, listen, that was a pretty intense environment. And Arizona at the time, remember, was like 6-0. They had guys on defense just crushing people. I mean, they were not your typical Arizona Cardinal team. They were coming in. You could argue that game going in, they were the best team in the NFL on the road. Remember the hit that he took either Isaiah Simmons or Budda Baker on the goal line? It was like,
yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
But I guess my ultimate point, just watching this, what I think, you just watch him at practice, I don't think it's going to look as much. Guy, we haven't seen one. Now, we've only been to 2 practices, and they were combined, 2 hours and 30 minutes. I have not seen one to the zone, anything in that vague, which is encouraging because he can do that. Just the zone read kind of.
So
crap.
they did drill
that I noticed.
Their early quarterback drills, they did some of that stuff where it was like it'd be Trey Lance taking the snap, Nate Sudfeld playing running back, standing beside him, presumably like in a pistol, or I guess not a pistol, a shotgun, off to his left, and he would do like hand pull, and then
to basically just get like the RPO footwork down.
Yeah, yep, and all of them did it, but in terms of running plays, no, they didn't.
Which, in fairness to even Trey Lance, like that is an NFL staple now. Like every team runs the RPO.
Yeah.
Right. Especially with a quarterback that can move a little bit. Like every team in the league has that in their playbook.
Yeah.
Right.
And it'll be Debo standing next to him though when he runs it in the game.
Yeah. Making $17 million a year or 28.